Autophiles. This is part 2 of our list of EVs for sale in Malaysia, and to be honest, I haven't yet uploaded the Tesla Model Y facelift and the Mercedes Maybach EQS SUV 680, I think. Yeah, so those two are not on my list yet. So in part 1 of my every EV available in Malaysia list, I stopped at the Zeekr X at 156,000 ringgit, around there. And today we're going to pick up from there and give maybe another 10 to 20 cars up to about 200,000 and go through those cars, whether they're good value or bad value, some historical context of when they were launched. As you can see, I'm in a bit of a rush, I'm sweating like crazy. And the reason why I'm rushing out this video is because I did part 1 and I had like a lot of stuff, live stuff come up, a test, a vacation, and a non-stop car testing for my main job. And yeah, so I didn't have time for Autophiles all of last week, and it looks like this week also I wasn't going to have time, and it's Friday and it's late on Friday and I have to go to another event after this. So I have like half an hour to shoot and edit this video, which is impossible. Will it get done? Only you know. Let's start at the Zeekr X, which is 156,000. Moving on from there, so a lot of people in the comments said that Zeekr X is a pretty good buy, and I agree. I just drove the Zeekr X after doing that video, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, around that time, and it was pretty good. It was very fashionable, stylish. I don't think it drove as well as the smart #1 or 3, even the non-Brabus versions drive better than the Zeekr X, but it definitely has a nice balance because it was a bit more springy and a bit more fashionable. So for an everyday buyer, I think performance doesn't matter so much. If you just want something that saves you a lot of money and gives you pretty good style and pretty good equipment, I think the Zeekr X base model is a good option, even though you might have to explain to people what a Zeekr is after you buy it. Next, we have the Hyundai Kona Electric E-Lite at 156,000. That was the launch price. This was one of the earliest EVs to be announced. Sime Darby was already like ready to launch an EV when the tax breaks came in. I think this was the first one to be launched. I could be mistaken, but I remember very distinctly it was like Taycan and this, which were like the really early EVs to come in tax-free. 156,000 when it first came out wasn't great value, and it still isn't great value, but I'm sure if you go to a Hyundai authorized dealer and ask for some pre-owned unit or pre-reg or even new old stock, you can get this much cheaper, presumably below 100k actually, because the Ioniq cars like the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6 new old stock, I've seen them go for 130,000, which is almost half price. So this one, imagine half price at 80,000, but I shouldn't get to that because otherwise I'll be saying like what are the discounted prices for all the other EVs, right? But at launch 156,000, bit of a tough sell. I mean, it is not that powerful, but it is powerful enough. I drove a couple of variants of the Kona, and even on the lower variant like this one, the E-Lite version, the lack of speed is not a factor at all. The torque is really there. It's like, it feels almost like an A35 kind of power, which is pretty respectable. They did a very good job on the Kona Electric, just that the pricing is not that attractive, and by the time like they started to market the electric version here, I think the second generation Kona came out worldwide, and that was an electric first vehicle, whereas this first generation Kona was petrol first, and then it had hybrid and electric versions stacked on. So not a very complete product and really not convincing at 156,000, but it's a decent car if you can get it for around 100k. I think that is the mark where you should think about it. Maybe the E-Lite version with the lower range. What's the range on this one? 305 kilometers. Maybe this one avoid lah, but the middle spec one, the E-Max and all that, those have like much better range. Like, let me see. Yeah, a bit better than this one. So get the ones with the higher range for around 100 plus K. I think it's a decent buy, but not the best. So next we have the Leapmotor C10. Leapmotor is a little bit like Xpeng in that it's a startup from China that you've never heard of before, but they have some things going for it. It's very tech-centric, so they kind of have like an app that you can use as your key. A few functionalities that are core to the car are built into the app, and yeah, the philosophy around the car is very human-centric and very tech-centric. Not really performance, not really dynamism. It's more space and yeah, connectivity to your smartphone. So it's an electric first company, so I don't think they're going to do petrol cars, and I mean they're definitely not going to do petrol cars. Hybrids I don't even think are in their portfolio yet. So the launch price I think was with a 10k discount, and apparently you can still get the 10k discount. So even though it is 159 in the official price, if you walk in right now and ask for one, you can still get it at 149. So 150 odd thousand ringgit for a pretty big car that's electric with decent range. The range is 424 kilometers. That's not bad. I'd say it's okay, but things to look out for. I don't think the tech was so well integrated as in the Xpeng cars, which we might talk about later. And also, what was the other thing? Yeah, the charging situation. The charging speed is pretty slow. I think it's like 7 kilowatts, less than 7 kilowatts for AC charging, and 84 kilowatts DC charging. You can get better charging speeds at this price, but you can't get better space. So if it's a family EV that you're after, Leapmotor C10, one of the better options. Only one spec, so the C10 150, that's it. You don't have to think about it too much. So you can get them from most Peugeot showrooms in Malaysia. They should be selling Leapmoto sometime in the future. Next up, we have the maximum spec MG4 EV. It's called the X Power. The MG4 X Power is the crazy spec one. It's got all-wheel drive, it's got 435 horsepower, it's got 600 Newton meters of torque, 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. This is, and I think it still is after like many months, it's still one of the top performance per ringgit cars. You basically get more performance than any other EV out here for just 160,000 ringgit. It's insane. But there are some tacky things about this car. Like the brake calipers are not real, like they're just painted and like they're just covers, so they're not the actual calipers. Besides that, it handles okay. I wouldn't say it's a bad driving car or anything like that. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit too excessive. So if you were going to go for an MG4, I would steer you away from the X Power and towards the Lux Extended for much cheaper. I think you save close to 10,000. In fact, it might be more now with discounts, and you get more range and a more practical package. I think that's what people should go for if they're going for an MG4. Next, we have the BYD Seal Dynamic, and this was a variant that was launched late last year. It was not in the initial launch phase. They brought this in with lower spec, smaller battery to hit a more attractive price point of 164,000 ringgit. Still got 200 horsepower, still got 310 Newton meters of torque, but the range has gone down to 460 kilometers, and I don't think it's WLTP. It could be, I have to double check, but the range, I remember it being significantly lower than on the other models. BYD Seal is like the, not to say the benchmark, but it is BYD's almost halo product. It's the one that they want to sell to you, and it's the one that people want. It's like the 3 Series from BMW, you know, that's your entry point to the brand. It's the correct entry point. Like if you go into BMW and you buy a 1 Series or a 2 Series, you bought the wrong one. or an X1, you know. The 3 Series is the correct BMW to go in. Same with BYD. If you got an Atto or you got a Dolphin, you got the wrong BYD. The Seal is the correct one to get. That's where value for money and perception and perceived value and design and everything just meets properly. So a lot of chaos happening with my cats today. The problem with this particular variant of the Seal is the range and the spec is a little bit lower than the other BYD Seals on offer. So I would also steer people away from this particular variant of the Seal, the dynamic variant. I think you can get a better deal if you shop elsewhere or if you shop for a higher variant of the Seal. So don't get the dynamic, it's not really worth it. We'll move on to the next entry, which is really not worth it, and that is the Renault Zoe R110. This is a mistake. Well, I don't think it's a mistake, but it's not a competitive car. This vehicle is 165,000 ringgit. It has half the power of the BYD Seal base model at 110 horsepower. Yikes. Yeah, so the performance is really not there. Range is okay, it's 395 kilometers, but the problem with this car is not really the spec, even though there are some spec issues here. The real problem with this car is that it has no aspirations of being a premium car. Most of the EVs that are on this list are all 100 plus thousand ringgit, which means once tax comes in, excise duty and import tax comes in, the price is effectively double, right? So we're talking about 200 to 300,000 ringgit cars when you're taxed fairly, right? When you're taxed like a petrol car, these cars would be worth 300,000 ringgit. And all of them have some aspiration, some kind of design philosophy or message or branding that makes it feel like the products are maybe worth something like that. So, you know, if you put like the MG4, you know, you put it next to BMW that is 300,000 ringgit, hey, the MG4 can do 0 to 100 in 4 seconds, you know. So there's some aspiration there, and the look and feel on the inside, minimalist, big screens, a lot of tech, that's all part of the package. The Renault Zoe did not get the memo. It's an old platform. I think this is supposed to be the second generation that was brought in here, but the second generation was more of a brain lift. It was more of like tech got better, battery tech got better, but the package is still the old school thing, and it just feels like a budget car. It feels like a Myvi that was electrified, and which is why I'm also not looking forward to the electric Myvi, because it's going to feel like a Zoe. Yeah, okay, maybe it's going to be half the price at 80,000, but you don't own the battery. It's nothing to be excited about because the car will have no aspirations. So we move on from the Zoe. The good thing, I mean, the one thing that the Zoe has going for it is that it is parked under Tan Chong's GoCar app. So if you want to experience the day-to-day of an EV, that means what would it be like to charge and drive EV daily, then I would recommend using the GoCar app and book a Renault Zoe or something else like the Ion Y Plus is on there as well. Book it for a week and live with the car, see if charging is something you can do in a week, you know, in your daily, weekly run. And yeah, that's what the Zoe is good for, just that, as a rental car, as a way to experience cars. And the next car on this list is equally bad, it's the Nissan Leaf. Kudos to Nissan and Tan Chong for bringing this in way before any EV incentives were spoken about. They brought this in even in the previous generation. They tried to make a case for it, but at that time there was no excise duty exemption, so the car was very expensive. Even now with the excise duty exemption taken away, the launch price and the readjusted price, I think it's still something like 169k. My cat is still going crazy. But yeah, they did, I think, do some pre-reg stuff for the Nissan Leaf. So if you find one for like 60, 70k, you could go for it. The problem is these cars also don't have that aspiration. I guess my cat will be hosting from now on. So Nissan Leaf, also no aspiration, but slightly more aspiration than a Renault Zoe. I should note that the thing that the Zoe had going for it is that the AC charging speed, the at-home charging speed, is 22 kilowatt, which is faster than almost anything else on this list. So that's the one thing it has going for it. I think we can do a couple of more before we stop for today. Smart #1 Pro, after the price drop, went down to 169,000. I think there's another price drop, but this is the price drop that I recorded. This is a pretty interesting buy because the only problem with this car is that the range is 315 kilometers, which is not great. The Leaf was 270, by the way, so you know that's also not great. But the Smart #1 at least has that premium aspect, the aspirational aspect, and it drives really well. It has 150 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, but this car, the way the chassis is tuned, is phenomenal, and it looks like a Mercedes almost from some angles. Smart #1 Pro, I wouldn't say it's the ideal EV, but if you have a lot of cars and you want to try an EV as a weekend car, roundabout city car, you don't want to spend too much but you still want some premium brand recognition, then Smart #1 might be okay. Still not exceptional value, but hey, it's the only brand so far we've seen that you recognize and also has a pretty decent EV. Like, yeah, you recognize Renault and Nissan, but the EV is not decent. You recognize Hyundai, but the EV is not decent. You recognize Smart, and the EV is pretty decent. So we're on to something, a different flavor here with the Smarts. Next on the list, we have the Aura 07 long range. Now, a lot of people don't like the way the 07 looks, and I can sympathize with that because a lot of the proportions are just plain weird. But you can't deny that they're going for something very, very distinct. Of course, it is not distinct from Panamera, as in it is copying the Panamera in a lot of ways. But in some other ways, I quite respect what GWM did with the Aura 07 and the Good Cat, because I like retro designs, and every time I think about, oh, what would my ideal car be, it would be a retro design but with modern sophistication, modern tech, or modern reliability at the very least. Something like the MX-5 updated, you know, even the original design of the MX-5 or the second gen MX-5 with updated internals, so brand new. That would be like the ideal car for me. And I get a whiff of that with the Aura 07 because it has that retro vibe, in this case a 60s Porsche vibe, in the shape of the hood and all that. And it's got some bold choices in terms of design with the glass roof and all the weird cat stuff going on. Speaking of weird cat stuff going on. Anyway, yeah, so all that combined in a package that is genuinely quite fun to drive, and it's got like engine noises in the car. We did a review if you want to go and check it out. The long range one is the one we drove, 170,000 ringgit. 200 horsepower is like just enough power to have fun with. 340 Newton meters to the top, 8-second car, very, very enjoyable. 11 kilowatt AC, which is slightly better than what BYD is giving you, but still not that great. 88 kilowatt DC charging is decent, but not great also. So the charging speeds could be better, but the range is pretty good on this one. They don't give you WLTP range, they give you NEDC, and the NEDC one is pretty high. When you convert it, it's around 500 plus kilometers. And I actually believe their NEDC range because from my experience driving the car, I got around 600 plus kilometers if I had just stuck to driving the car the way I was driving it. And I drove it for a week and I never charged it. And I went to Klang a few times. I test drove the car with Bo. I did a lot of stuff with the car, and it just never ran out of battery. So the 07 is it's a good buy, I would say. Value-wise, there's no denying the 07 is good. But subjectively speaking, I can understand that a lot of people don't like the way it looks. Okay, one last car, then we stop. My cats won't stop. The last one is the Zeekr X flagship all-wheel drive. I have not driven this car. I've driven the two-wheel drive version of the Zeekr X, and I thought the Zeekr X two-wheel drive was very, very competent and a very decent package. The only thing that was lacking in the Zeekr X was the AC charging speed was a bit slow. This one solves it by giving it 11 kilowatt, which is industry standard. But what is good about this is that it gives you a lot of power, 428 horsepower. It's insane. 543 Newton meters of torque. 3.8 second car at 172,000 ringgit. So the price doesn't go up by much versus the Zeekr X two-wheel drive, but you get so much more power and a small bump in spec. I think the rims are also a little bit bigger. If you want to upgrade from the two-wheel drive to the all-wheel drive, I wouldn't say it's a bad value. The thing is, I don't think the Zeekr X in two-wheel drive form, it was not inspiring to drive fast. So I don't think this with all the power is going to be great to drive fast either. So if you're going to be spending this kind of money, maybe consider a Smart #1 or #3. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in part 3 of our EV list rundown before we get to more launches for 2025. Yeah, Autophiles signing out.